Hello and welcome. I'm so pleased to introduce you tonight to my guest. My guest is Thomas Rademacher, who is the Minnesota Teacher of the Year 2014. We've had the opportunity to interview several others throughout the last many years, and it's just an exciting, wonderful honor. So welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's
And you
new.
found out May
4th? Yeah.
So it's not been a month yet.
Nope, not a month. And
So
real
were
new.
you shocked, Tom, when you heard your name?
Yeah, it's a really long process. So it's, I got nominated in September or October by a student.
And I read there were 128 nominees this year.
There's 128 people that accepted nominations.
Oh, okay.
So they're to accept a nomination means you put together a whole binder full of essays and letters and all sorts of things. And
So there were some that probably declined.
yeah, it was a lot of work. A lot of I know, and I know other people who've gone through it who said just creating that binder, having a chance to look back on everything they've accomplished was amazing. I mean, the day I sent it off, I thought, like, if nothing else happens, it's so worth getting to have done that. And that was
Pull it all together and look at it.
It's
and
something we don't do as teachers very often.
Or most people don't have that.
Yeah, I'm going to look
process.
at the last decade of my life and put it all together into a binder. Yeah, so that was really cool.
Share.
And then, every step of the way, I was convinced that's it. All right, I put in my nomination. That's it. Okay, I made semifinalist. That's fantastic, but nothing more.
Just being a finalist is the honor all I could hope for.
And finalist was such a big deal, and you go for a whole weekend of interviews and lots of stuff, and I met just some of the best teachers I've ever met in my life. I was blown away by the quality of people that I was a finalist with, and I was just sure, I was just picking who to root for because they were all, I was sure, so deserving. And so I had barely written anything up as an acceptance speech. They said you should write a little something, and I wrote almost nothing because I was just so sure. And then all of a sudden, the longest 2-hour banquet ever, and then they announced it at the end, and I was absolutely blown away.
Was there kind of that moment of feeling this isn't real or pinch me kind of?
That still happens. There was the Minnesota Educator, which is a really great publication that the union puts out. I got home the other day, and in my mailbox, the new Minnesota Educator was there, and I pull it out and open it, and it's just this big, picture of my face on the front. I still was like, oh, weird. They sent everybody a magazine with their face on the cover, and it took me a while to be like, oh, right, nope. Yeah, just me. Like, that's it. Yeah, it still hasn't totally sunk in, not at all.
Speaking of your face and being in public places, he was featured in the Star Tribune more than once, but great photo here.
I love that picture.
And your wife is even in the photo, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
In the background, and the woman hugging you had been the
2006.
The 2006
Teacher of the Year, Leanne Stevens, who knows me through some teaching groups we work with. She was so excited. I think she might have been more excited than I was. She beat everyone else to the podium to give me a hug, and yeah, I mean, it was a fabulous moment.
Now you teach at the Fair School, which is right downtown in Minneapolis, and I honestly hadn't heard of it. But it's a fine arts school. Yep. You said it's been around 14 years?
I think we're in our 14th year. Downtown, it's a little bit newer as a fair school. It used to be known as IDDS, but it was the same district. It's a WEMEP, the West Metro Education Program. It's run by Minneapolis and the surrounding districts. So it's a public school for all those districts. Anyone in those districts can send their kids to our schools. And we have one school in downtown and one school in Crystal. So I started in Crystal for the first 6 years of teaching, and then I moved downtown.
And it's for kids middle school and up?
We actually go K-12.
Oh, you do?
So yeah,
Okay.
downtown we have K-3 on the lower floor, and then 9-12 on the upper floors, and then all the grades in between, they go to Crystal.
Oh,
But
interesting.
the programming and everything kind of runs sequentially. K-12, so kids can have kind of a single experience going through our district.
And you teach now English and literature.
Mm-hmm.
And you were quoted, and I thought this was so interesting, saying that you love teaching literature because it gives you a chance to talk about life values and philosophies. And I'm paraphrasing. But
Yeah, I mean,
that made sense to me.
if you look at the core classes, if it's foreign language, science, math, English, and social studies, English is the only one that really studies art. We study literature and we study artworks, every day, novels and poems and plays. And so where everyone in our district brings art into our classroom, I have the easiest job where we're already studying artwork. And we're studying, ultimately, the study of literature is the study of how art works. Mm-hmm. And so it's really easy once you're kind of getting into the ideas of what makes a novel important or what makes a poem really interesting, to bring in lots of different aspects of things from around the world and lots of different kinds of artwork and tie them all together.
Do you teach both American literature and world literature?
Yep, those are my two classes. So
Okay.
I have 10th grade World Lit and 11th grade American.
Who, just for fun, is your favorite American author or poet?
Goodness.
Do you have one?
Yeah, that's like a really hard one. My father and I, probably earlier than I was ready to read them, he was handing me Kurt Vonnegut novels.
Wow.
And we spent many, many years through my middle school and high school where we would read either a book one after the other, we'd read it both at the same time and talk about them. And so in a lot of ways, because they're tied to my dad still, those are like the chicken soup books, when I'm feeling off, I need to get grounded or whatever, I'll pick up a Vonnegut novel and read.
Well, that's a real logical and personal reason to love that man.
Yeah, yeah.
Your mother was a teacher.
Yep.
Your grandmother was a teacher.
My great-grandmother, actually.
Oh, not your grandmother.
Yeah, my
so
great...
we skip a generation.
We skip a generation there. Yeah, my great-grandmother actually got married in secret to my great-grandfather because he was going off to fight in World War I, and she wanted to stay teaching, but you weren't allowed to teach then if you were a married woman.
That's right.
So they got married in secret so that she could continue teaching.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, and actually originally I was born with the last name Kraus, but when me and my wife got married, we took my great-grandparents' last name because they were just this amazing, amazing couple and just both great people. She lived in Upper Michigan and she wrote poems and she wrote letters to the editor under, she had a pseudonym that was a male lumberjack because no one would publish her stuff because she was a woman, and so she pretended to be a lumberjack, and just an awesome woman. And
you wouldn't have known her. I mean, the age.
I met her and my great-grandpa when I was
did?
very, very young. They both lived into their 90s. So I knew them just a little bit.
You were so young, though. You probably hardly remember.
Barely, but it was, you could tell from all their kids. I have an Uncle Noel who lives in Minnesota, and you can just tell from the way he approaches the world and the warmth he has that, his what kinds of people his parents were. And my grandmother was the same way, and you could just tell that the Rademachers were great.
And your mother taught what kind of, where did she teach?
She taught special ed in Waterloo, Wisconsin. So she taught, it's called EBD, so emotional behavior disorder. And a lot of kids that had, prison records and real tough. And she taught them in Wisconsin. And then when my youngest brother graduated from high school, my mom quit her job and packed a backpack and traveled all over the world for about a year. And everywhere she went, she met, some kid in trouble, needed help. And it doesn't matter, when teachers leave, they never stop teaching. They just don't.
Yeah.
And so my mom still to this day, she hasn't had a classroom in many years, but she's still a teacher every day, for sure.
And is your father still alive?
No.
Oh, okay. So he didn't get to see this wonderful.
No, I didn't get to see it, but I know he would have been. I mean, he was as proud of me the day that I picked education over law, because his 2 other sons are lawyers, and so he's embarrassed by them and happy that I went into anything other than law. So that was as good as we were going to get. So
was it your grandmother or your great-grandmother said becoming a teacher is a way to save lives and really serve?
That's really my mom.
Or your mother's quote.
And it was really the way that she approached her job. And I mean, what she hears, she's still in touch with kids that she taught years and years and years ago that are now, 30 years old or older, who tell her that they wouldn't be here if they wouldn't have had her when they were in high school.
And you said you had an experience like that too, with a girl who was suicidal. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure there are probably more than one when you work with kids that age, but
there are. I mean, it's one of those things where even on the hardest day and the worst day, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than teach. And it's one of those. The fact that I get the honor of getting to be that important to some kids is really important.
Make that much
to
of
me.
a difference.
Yeah, and it hopefully for all teachers, I think it helps us hold ourselves to a high standard. You can't take those days off, and you can't mail it in for a year. It's really important to every kid that you have that you are at the best you can be every day, because you never know what day is going to be the one where a kid really needs you.
You also had a quote, and I love this. You said, "Each kid is giving us the most he or she can on a particular day." And I think a lot of educators, a lot of people don't view their employees that way, for sure. But you truly do look at the kids as they're doing their best.
Yeah, as often as I can. And I mean, I get tired and I have bad days. And
Sure.
I think when teachers get tired, they see their classroom as one thing, as one problem or one thing that they're working with. And when people kind of step out of that boundary, the kid is misbehaving, or this is the kid with their head down, or whatever, it becomes easy to just try to yell that kid back into place. And I'm certainly, guilty of that. But on my good days, I recognize that I think kids really do understand how important it is for them to get an education and for them to do well in school.
Be present.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of kids are really trying their hardest to do so, but you don't know what happened to them the night before, the day before, or the year before. I mean, you might there might be a lot.
A big percentage are probably coming with some hard thing on their shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, because they're human, and that's something I say often. Like, school is it's full of humans, and teaching is full of humans, and that means everyone you meet every day is imperfect, and everyone has other things going on. And I don't think teaching would be the art form that it is if everyone just acted the same.
Yeah, it'd be a little boring, right?
It'd be a lot boring, and it'd be a lot easier, I think, too. But
it would be easier.
Yeah.
You know what I think is someone I practiced taught years ago. I did get a major in education as well as a couple other things. And I think it's so hard to think of teaching now and think of how do you, kind of hear and deal with each child in a group of how many in your classes at FAIR? 20, 30?
Around 30, yeah,
30?
Most of my kids, yeah. And that's lucky. I mean, that's lucky in Minnesota.
Really?
30
is
really lucky for a high school class. There's a lot
That's so big, Tom.
It's big. There's a lot of districts that average around 40 now for a high school class of kids, and that's something we need to be changing for sure.
Yes, and I want to hear some of your recommendations, but just a little bit more about the quiet child who's not causing trouble, who is not one of the star pupils that you're really aware of, or one of the problem kids. How do you keep track of those kids in the middle?
Yeah, and I think, I was just talking today with a really great educational leader. Her name is Madeline Edison. She runs a group called Educators for Excellence. Just with her today, and we were talking about kind of that same thing. And she was saying that, you know, it's really not about behaving and misbehaving. It's about engaged and not engaged. And so I think when you look at kids through that lens, a lot of times those kids that you'd be looking at as a behavior issue, they're with you. Or they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in class, but maybe just doing it loudly, which is okay. And then
but
you look
disrupting the class, perhaps.
Maybe, but usually, I mean, a lot of times, I think that teachers just bristle at noise because there's this idea that a good classroom is a quiet classroom, which doesn't work for most kids or all kids. You know, some kids are only going to learn when they get to be loud and crazy and messy about their learning. I think I was one of those kids, so I think I feel for those kids.
You can understand that.
But, you know, it's too easy to not notice the three kids who, in my school, those kids are drawing. They're just sitting and they're just drawing and drawing and drawing.
Spacing out a little.
Yeah, you know, and you want to give them some space to get to do that in their day, but it's too easy sometimes to pull completely away then, and then they're not with the class. And they're not learning, and so sometimes they do get ignored because they're quietly not learning. But that's just as big of an issue as loudly not learning.
Right, it would be.
Know? Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the goal of learning.
Yeah.
So how do you reach those quiet kids?
I mean, I think my kids will notice there's very rarely 2 days in a row that feel alike. And I think that's true of most teachers, you know, that you switch it up pretty often so that there's a day that works really well for quiet kids. There's a day that works really well for loud kids. And there's a day where we're all kind of doing things by ourselves. And there's a day that we are doing a big group or small groups. And but ultimately it comes down to like the most important part of teaching is that you have to get to know your kids. And not just to get to know them, but to really like respect them as the full people that they are. And when you're only looking at them as a matter of discipline or keeping everyone in line, then you're not getting to know them.
Right.
And so I think there's probably sometimes that people might walk by my room and see things that don't look like I'm working, you know, because I'm not...
Little chaotic in Mr. Rademacher's class. Huh?
Always a little chaotic, yeah. But I'm not in front of a board, you know, writing things down and they're following along with me, or, you know, sometimes it's a lot, it doesn't look like that. And a lot of that time is time that I will spend getting to talk to my kids and getting to catch up with them a little bit while they're working on things, or I'll work with one group while the other groups are kind of managing themselves for a while. And, you know, I think in my experience, that kind of learning ends up being a lot more authentic for them, and they engage a lot more.
More varied, and it sounds fun. I have several friends who were teachers, and I think they would probably use the word burned out. They loved it at one point, and then they just got overwhelmed by the responsibilities, the work, the discipline problems. Do you have any thoughts in terms, I mean, you've been a teacher 8 years.
8 years, yeah, so.
You're still full of enthusiasm, obviously.
Sure.
Do you have any precautionary things you tell yourself to sort of ensure that won't happen to you, Tom?
Well, I think there's different stages of it. You know, my first couple of years, I kept a list on my desk of other jobs that I would be good at, and I think that was kids that were making me do that. I was still learning how to teach. The kids were fine, but I was learning. You know. And
you
so
needed a backup plan.
Yeah, I would go home so tired or so frustrated or whatever that I needed to look at this list and be like, okay, there wasn't a lot of things on the list because this is pretty much what I'm qualified to do. And then as the years went on, and I think I kind of figured out the kids a little bit more, or what I needed to do with the kids, it's really the adults that are exhausting. You know, the burnout, I think, really comes from the system that teachers need to work in often. And when you see decisions being made that you know aren't going to be the best for the kids in your room, and they're being made because of budget reasons, or they're being made because, maybe on the surface the school looks better, but at the heart of it, the actual work for the kids is not better.
That would be very hard.
Those are really tiring days, when that happens and you see that happen. And I guess, for me, I mean, it's a constant thing. There's definitely days that I go home really, really tired. And, we're talking, it's now and it's just right near the end of the school year. And so teachers that I'm talking to now they're pretty tired people. They're ready for the end and kind of
some time to rejuvenate.
Some time to rejuvenate and get a fresh start in September. But it's a constant thing to kind of look at as far as, am I taking care of myself? Am I putting myself in a position to be positive? And I think one thing in here is a lot of times people will say, only worry about what you can change. And I think that that's true, but I also think teachers sell themselves short as to the amount of things that they can change. And so I think if I was giving up on the system that's tiring me out, I think I probably would have been done teaching a couple years ago. But I feel like there's a tremendous potential for teachers to change the system that they're in. And not just teachers, but people who are passionate about schools and education can change schools. And I feel like there's a movement to do that. That movement keeps me energized.
That's exciting, because I think that's true for everybody at a lot of different levels. Just think of environmental causes. If we think, there's nothing we can do, we maybe won't do much, I mean.
And doing a little bit is better than doing nothing, right?
And it's energizing, and you get some hope going. When you talk like this with other teachers, do they listen? Do they get it?
Depends on which teachers. I think so. I really do. I think there's parts of teaching that are a little, I guess my first year of teaching, there was an older teacher who kind of pulled me aside, and he said, the best piece of advice anyone ever gave me was to just close my door and just be in your room. Don't worry about what's going on outside of it. And for me, I think that was some of the worst advice anyone ever gave me as a teacher. But I think there's people that get into teaching because they want their room and they want their class, and they just kind of want to do that. And for some people that works forever. Some of the best teachers I know, their world is, or their room is their universe, and they do a fantastic job in it, and they're not interested in doing things outside of their room. But I think there are a lot of teachers that when they come in every day, they really see the things that aren't working, and they are the ones that have to work through them. And they see people on a state level or a national level bickering about what's right or what's wrong for schools, and they never see teachers pulled into those conversations. And they see, they have stories to tell that I think need to be told and brought up, because I think they are energized to do the work. They just need to be kind of either pushed or invited in a little bit.
And you've said that one of your goals this year, when you'll be going around the state and talking to President Obama next spring, is to pull together good ideas for solutions. If you could think, Tom, we just have a couple minutes left, unfortunately, if you could think of your top maybe 3 things that you would like to change, kind of in a short statement here, what would they be in terms of the school system?
I think there's a few things that are really within our reach that we could do pretty quickly. One is that our teaching corps in Minnesota is far too white. Depending on what numbers you look at, I mean, it's 96 or 97% of Minnesota's teachers are white. And so we need more people of color in the profession. And I think one thing that's right there is a lot of those people are successful as EAs in our classrooms right now, and are interested and are successful in the hardest parts of teaching, in relationships with students and all those things that are really challenging.
And EA stands for?
Educational assistants.
Right,
So they're the ones who are in our classrooms and helping our teachers and helping our students, working one-on-one with our most challenging kids, And they're doing that often with very little training on how to do it. And they're doing it really well. And I think we need pathways for those people
Get them into the
to make it easier for them to get
teaching.
licensed to become teachers. So I think that's something that we could do, and districts are already looking in that direction, and there's work being done, but I think it's something that we could really push on to figure out what do we need to do to recruit and retain more people of color into the profession, because it'll be important for our kids to have that.
With especially our city here, Minneapolis, St. Paul city is, what is it? Percentage of kids is over 50%.
I know there's a
children
wide
of color, right?
Yeah, there's a wide gap between the percentage of kids of color in our schools and teachers.
We have less than a minute.
Okay.
What's your second favorite possible solution to improving the system?
I think we need to find a way to tell people what's happening in our schools that goes beyond what test scores show. But I think it needs to be an honest measure so that when people are out there, what parents want to know is this a good school to send my kid to?
Right,
And they're looking
right.
at not just what the test scores are, but are there arts, is there social services, are there nurses, are there all those things together? We need to create a measure that tells people honestly, here's what's happening in this school, so that schools will start working to do, the specific work that parents want.
Well, on those wonderful 2 suggestions, we need to say goodbye, but thank you so much for coming down and sharing some of your passion. It's contagious.
Thank you.
And
It was a pleasure. It really was.
Well,
This was
thank
great.
you. I can see why you were chosen, Tom. Thank you
Thank you.
again, and congrats. We've been talking with Thomas Rademacher, the Minnesota Teacher of the Year 2014. I hope you can join us next week. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.